Thank you for having me. Good to see some friendly faces around the mosaic of the Zoom screen here. I actually like the grid mode. I like to see everybody. Certainly not very conducive to my well-being to be speaking to a picture of myself for 90 minutes. So I like the grid. Yeah, thank you for that warm welcome. Daniel I mean, it's just so great. It's so great. I just keep getting more and more vibes of the work you're doing, Daniel, around building community and bringing people together around topics that are close to my heart and essential, I believe, for the thriving of humankind in the future. So I'm just always glad to get an email from Daniel about something, some way to collaborate. So thank you for that. Um, yeah, so my name is Jay, and in case you haven't shared yet, I did leave a message in the chat asking for anyone to share one word or phrase that describes your relationship with technology. And even looking at the responses that have come in already, I hear sort of like, I wish I didn't have to use a phone, grudging acceptance that tech is a part of life now. It doesn't faze me, but it no longer fascinates me, but less screen time would be optimal. Bittersweet. I think you can kind of see what I'm pointing at here. There's a very complicated and confusing relationship that we all have with technology these days. And I'm going to say something that's like getting harder to say, which is that I love technology. I love it. I find it very fascinating, very exciting. Ever since I was a little kid, tinkering around with code, playing video games. Still remember when my father, I think I must have been 4 years old. My father brought home a big paper bag, put it on the kitchen table. Probably one of my first memories, pulls out a box. It has like a space station on it with control panels and this word that I'd never heard before in my early ability to read, Nintendo. And I didn't know what it was, but I saw my brother, who's 3 years older than me, just freaking out. And so, like, when you're that young, it's all, especially as a younger sibling, you're socially referencing, right? And I'm just like, oh, if Neil is this excited, this is going to be great. And of course, an hour later, after my father tinkered with the wires behind the cathode ray TV, and then of course, my older brother got the first turn. So after he played his fill, I got a chance to kind of play Mario for the first time, and I was immediately transfixed. Now, this is a story of kind of like pure, joyful, engaging love of technology and the wonder of video games that led me to like figure out how to code and play on the early web. But like, do you feel that contrast between that vibe with the way we feel about technology now, right? Like what's happened in the past 20, 30 years where now it's just bittersweet and we're using words like addiction and we're confused really. And it's not even that our relationship with technology has completely soured. It's more that it's kind of bifurcated into this confusing roller coaster where we move daily from like falling in love with a Netflix show to like beating ourselves up for staying up too late to like binge watch. And then like we switch from like having incredible work meetings or like calling distant family members and feeling deep connection to just like being stuck on like getting more likes on our post or whatever, or whatever, or like reading headlines that are just triggering us about what's going on in the world. It is just confusing. And so what I'm describing is really this seed that led me to like down the path of trying to reconcile this in my own life and ultimately start to share and write about how do we reconcile this confusing tension in our lives. And I'm gonna, go through today two, and if we have time, three strategies. As Daniel mentioned, the book that I wrote, the subtitle has about 7 strategies, so we're not going to get to all of them. I'm going to pick three. And because this is practicing transition, I'm going to focus on 3 transitions in a typical day. One transition is getting up in the morning. The next transition is ending work. and the final transition is going to bed. And we're going to explore a kind of experiment in each of those transitions. And so, what these strategies represent are kind of like insights that I was forced into because I fell in love with meditation about 15, 20 years ago. But I also work in tech as a designer. And so a lot of my adult life has been wrestling between two worlds that are, not seen as compatible. So I'm like not exactly pulling out my Nintendo Switch to play Zelda while I'm on a meditation retreat in the common room, right? But I'm also like when I'm at work for a tech company, I mean, think of it this way, right? If I went and told all my colleagues in tech that I'm going to take a week off, I'm going to fly to the beach, I'm going to drink myself stupid for 7 days, I'm going to like stay up all night and I'm going to come back, they're all going to be like, "Have a great vacation." But if I told them I'm going to go for 7 days, I'm going to sit in silence and practice working on myself, and I'm going to like deepen my subtle insight into the movements of my mind in hopes that I gain skills and tools to sort of show up more authentically, they're kind of going to look at me like, "Why would you do that? Like, why would you slow down? I thought we were accelerating to the singularity here. AI is going to be the future and blah, 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 blah," right? So these are the two worlds that I've been kind of wrestling with. And the reality is, in my 20s, there wasn't really a social norm for someone who was kind of in both those worlds. And so, as a younger person, I actually was really pained by this and felt like I had to choose. And it ended up with me kind of spiraling into a lot of like guilt and self criticism and shame when I'm like, neck deep in the tech world, I am kind of like beating myself up about not being mindful enough and being like addicted to my screens. And then when I'm on retreat, some part of me is like, "Oh, yes." But then I'm someone who loves tech. I feel this FOMO. I'm missing out on the latest games. I'm not up to date on the news. I'm not like creating things in the digital space, which is like a huge passion of mine. And so it took me a long time to figure out how to reconcile these worlds. So I could ramble a little bit more about my personal story, but that gives you a little bit of context about like where these strategies are coming from. They're coming from me trying to reconcile this in my own life, aggressively digesting all the science I could, understanding the neuroscience of meditation and tech, engagement and human computer interaction, but also applying and testing in my own life. So, one thing I'll say as a kind of blanket statement, which is one of the key things that I have learned on this journey, is much like our relationship with food, the guilt, the shame, the self-flagellation, the self-criticism is not helpful, right? It's like you can beat yourself up for watching too much Netflix or for being on your phone too much. And maybe the guilt there might motivate you to like do a little bit better tomorrow, but it's not going to help you gradually find a healthier relationship with technology, which, as some of you pointed out in the chat, it's kind of inevitable that we need to have a relationship with technology right now. And that's similar to food, right? It's like you can't just quit food. So in order to have a healthy diet, you have to have this like healthy dialogue between like being able to enjoy a cupcake once in a while, but not eating 12 cupcakes, but also being able to like educate yourself on diet and nutrition and like eat in this like healthy dialogue. And if you're just beating yourself up like you're like, "God damn it, Jay, why are you eating so many cupcakes?" And you're just like whipping yourself on the back. That's not the road to health and balance. And so the same is true with technology. The other blanket statement I want to say before we get into the practical strategies is, and in no way, when I say we need to sort of accept technology, am I letting humanity off the hook for some of the problematic systems at play here. So I just want to say that up front. First of all, there's like the environmental impact, right? There's the like, justice impacts with the way technology is currently implemented. But then I'm also really passionate about, as a designer, a lot of modern technology, due to the incentive structures of our society and our organizations, it's basically designed to harvest as much attention as possible. And so experts call this the attention economy, where the reality is the more attention you get, the more you can convert that attention into money and even behavior change. So you can sell advertising space, which is like a direct monetization of attention. But you can also use that attention to build your brand, and you can manipulate behavior to get people to buy your products or buy other people's products or behave in certain ways that benefit you or your organization. Or, if I have to say it out loud, you can also manipulate how people vote, their public opinion, their view on certain issues. And so we've all seen the misinformation and disinformation and polarization that's plaguing the modern digital newsscape as well. So there is a huge systemic issue here that we need to address. That being said, if you're someone who's looked up what's going on in the world with technology and the attention economy, a lot of the narratives out there will lead you to feel powerless. But this is an attention economy, and someone who is deep learning and practicing meditation, which is ultimately mindfulness, is all about learning to reclaim and harness your ability to pay attention. One thing I know for sure is that just because those systems need to be evolved, you are not powerless. This is an issue that shows up in your daily life. It shows up in the phone on your bedside table. It shows up in the way you talk to your kids about technology. It shows up in those moments waiting for the bus when you pull your phone out. It's areas where if you are able to harness your intention and start to understand the interplay between kind of a more open awareness and the vector of attention and how it moves, that there are so many things you can do in your own lives and to benefit the people around you and even the next generation and young people. And so that's a very, very important framing for us. So I'd love to actually, before we get into the first strategy, take a pause there to see if anyone has any reflections or thoughts or questions that you might want to unmute and say or share in the chat, just in case there's anything right up front that feels like it's an obstacle. We don't need to spin off into a whole discussion, but like an obstacle to sort of openly trying these strategies and experimenting with this for the rest of our session. So otherwise, you can just give me a thumbs up, which just gives me a sense that we're ready to move on. But let me know how you're feeling.
So, I was a little, uh, I was a little scattered. My thoughts were going here and there. If I summarize, what I heard is that don't feel guilt of you. Don't feel guilt in the bigger landscape, in the inner landscape, and be open to notice yourself. Is that the summary?
Yes, the what I would add is that think about what the goal is here, right? The
Mm.
goal is a healthy and secure relationship with technology. And guilt is very rarely a stepping stone in that direction. I mean, there's probably some very subtle moments where it might be useful, but largely, I think myself and many around are feeling a whole lot of guilt. I mean, even the term binge watch, it's just, I don't know if it's the same in French, but it's just a term that is dripping with shame, right? It's like, binge watch. So it's like there is something that we need to evolve about the way we think about achieving a healthy relationship with technology in our personal lives. And that's something that we have to do alongside the systemic changes that need to happen in the space. We are not powerless. So the guilt and the shame, especially like shame, I have a 6-year-old who loves video games. And there's a lot of work that I have to do with him. But shaming him for his love of video games is not the way. And I see lots of parents doing that. And I even have slipped into it. And it's just not the way.
Yeah. The nuance of guilt had me. Thank you.
Hmm. No problem. I'm seeing Rich's comment in the chat here. I'm struck by how relationship with tech can slip into one way, consuming Instagram, for example, and losing time, and how that there is no expression or imagination in that. You're being fed everything. Is that the attention economy you're talking about? Yes. So if you think about the Instagram feed, which actually originally was developed by Facebook for Facebook, it was the news feed. but has now become part of TikTok and the dominant way algorithms and AI have shown up in our lives. Like a lot of people are talking about this new AI revolution, but in fact, it was the social media revolution where AI really started to play a role in our lives because Facebook basically innovated AI algorithms that take data based on what you click on, what you comment on, what you like, what you view, and fed that into an algorithm that was designed to surface whatever content you were most likely to engage with. A very simple proposition from an engineering point of view. 10 years later, Mark Zuckerberg was testifying to Congress for accidentally breaking democracy, right? So that's an extreme statement, but it's like these algorithms started to show us whatever would command our attention. And attention is such a fundamental operating system of our lives. You might even describe your life experience as a series of moments of your serial attention being paid to things. You wake up and then your attention pays to a bunch of things and then you go to bed. And so the idea that we're applying these sophisticated technologies to harvest our attention is actually driving us to democratic breakdowns, but also mental health breakdowns. And so it's an incredibly powerful thing. And so this is what we're calling the attention economy. And it can also be used in a positive frame sometimes, like someone who's like a creator on Instagram. Like, like if I post a picture on Instagram and then it's like me like this, okay? And then I post another picture on Instagram and it's me and my shirt, my collar is up or something and I get more likes. So then I'm like, okay, well, every time I put a picture, I should put my collar up. And then you like extract that to the modern world where what people are doing on social media, it's changing who they are to maximize attention. And on a spiritual frame, I would say that like it's sort of deepening a problematic pattern we've all faced that, Buddhists and meditation teachers have talked about for a long time, which is that we start to move away from our authentic selves in service of trying to be someone that we think other people might love, when in fact we are lovable as we are. And so the attention economy, that simple algorithm, takes us into some pretty deep rabbit holes that are not necessarily the direction I think we want to move. And I saw the comment about the social dilemma. Thanks, Dan. That's great. It's a great reference from an organization. They originally were called Time Well Spent. Now they're called the Center for Humane Technology. Great thought leader there named Tristan Harris, who I found like is a really early voice in this space, along with myself. 10 years ago, I was like thinking about this and I couldn't find anyone. He was one of the first people I found. When I saw that movie, I actually had a kind of mixed reaction because I was so happy that these issues were becoming and seeing the light of day and people were starting to really take them seriously. But I was really worried that the tone of that movie is almost like a horror movie. The soundtrack is like a horror movie, and the language is very victim mentality. And so this is part of like the seed where I started becoming more vocal publicly about this. Because as a mindfulness practitioner, I was like, all these facts are correct, but we are not victim. We are not powerless. We have so much power in this equation and we need to exert that power in our own lives. It starts from within, in our families, in our communities. And that's eventually, I believe, going to broaden out to society. And it already is starting to do so. So, Gen Z are like, there's a lot of people in Gen Z that are really vocal about this. And I think one thing we can offer to the next generation is that this reminder of like letting go of the shame and guilt and finding a healthy relationship. That there's, in fact, so much joy, meaning, love, and purpose and connection that you can find online, even what we're doing right now. So the idea that technology is bad or evil is not, it's a blunt instrument when we actually we want to enjoy beautiful experiences online and we want to let go of the platforms that are trying to harvest our minds and leading us down rabbit holes that lead us to hate ourselves and to hate each other. Okay. Great. I'm glad I left that pause. I feel like we got to some interesting places. All right, let's go into the first section here, which I want to talk about the morning routine, which is a very interesting area when you think about technology. I'm sure you can take a moment to reflect on how technology plays a role in your morning. You might think about where you keep your phone and what your first interactions with technology look like. And of the 7 strategies in my book, the one that I thought would be nice to bring today in terms of transition is there's a strategy in the book called setting boundaries for positive ritual. Setting boundaries for positive ritual. Now, one of the default responses or reactions that people tend to have when they start to open their eyes to what technology is doing to their minds is they start to set boundaries, right? Give me a sign if you've ever set a boundary around technology. If your camera's on, give me a wave, say something in the chat. Seeing lots of hands moving. Yeah, hey, I'm only going to do an hour of screens today, or I'm only going to do 30 minutes of TikTok, or I'm, not going to watch TV on weekdays, or, I mean, setting boundaries for our kids, right? You're only allowed 30 minutes of screen time. You're only allowed an hour of screen time. Only one season of a show. Exactly, right? So we've got these boundaries. Now, here's the thing. Often these boundaries are dripping with what? Let's repeat the chorus. Guilt and shame, right? We're kind of like shaming ourselves. Oh, I use too much TikTok. I am not able to handle this. I'm addicted to my phone. I'm watching junk. What is this silly garbage I'm watching? I should be reading a book, et cetera, et cetera. Not the way forward. And so what I've kind of experimented with this, and just to say, I have gone through seasons of life, like years, where I have lived with like strict shaming, guilt, austerity. There were years where I got rid of my TV completely. I've gone through all this, and that's why I'm here to tell you that it's not the way. Because what tends to happen is you just kind of end up in this like self-hating routine where like you're demanding so much of yourself and you're setting these impossible boundaries and you're kind of creating this just like entirely negative relationship with technology and you're living a life of just total strictness and austerity. But of course, boundaries are not useless. And this is where I like to invoke the concept of ritual. So, how about we reframe a boundary into a ritual? We bring positivity into it. So, I'll give you an example of a couple of rituals that I use that are framed positively. So, one example might be that I read paper magazines to catch up on the news. So, when I wake up in the morning, my phone is tethered to my desk in my office here in the room I'm in right now. It's not in my bedroom. But I don't do it in a way of like, oh, stupid Jay, always looking at your phone in the morning. I leave it here. I actually have an alarm that plays one of my favorite albums in the morning automatically. So, the opening notes to Tycho, Sunrise Projector, might come on, and I wake up. And instead of turning my alarm off, I let that be the soundtrack to my morning. I go do my routine. Maybe I stretch a bit. I come down. I want to have some breakfast or play with my kid, and I want to catch up on the news. I pull up a paper magazine. And so I look at, delayed analysis, deep analysis, not of the flash in the pan news story of today. This old man attacked this old man in the house floor and the world is coming to an end. But like, I'm in a kind of hunt for like true journalism, which is harder to find. And it tends to be like, I'm not a politician. I don't need to know what happened today. And I find a lot of depth and engagement and excitement reading about what happened over the past 3 months by someone who really has filtered the noise and given me clarity on a piece of paper. It's not a phone. So I don't use those kind of news apps. And honestly, it's something I look forward to in the morning. Like I got my tea, I've got some breakfast, maybe my son is finally like occupied playing something, and I get to read an in-depth analysis of who knows what. That's an example of like a positive ritual. It's not, oh, you suck, Jay, put your phone away, you're too addicted. It's here's a beautiful way to catch up on the news in the morning. I'll give you another example. I have a practice where I only watch one episode of TV per day, but I don't set that as a kind of aggressive, like you can't binge watch too much TV. I actually frame it as a positive ritual where it's something that I can choose very intentionally what I want to watch. I make myself a snack like popcorn and like get a nice drink. I put all my distractions away. I leave my phone upstairs and I watch something really great. And anyone who tells you like, oh, TV is a waste of time, I disagree. Like TV is amazing. Story is the language of humanity. There are incredible movies. There are incredible TV shows that make you feel things and see things in different ways. For example, I have a son who's neurodivergent, and there's this show on Netflix called Atypical, and it just like normalizes teenagehood for autistic individuals. And it was like, I was like, had tears in my eyes as I understood more about my child. I watched a show on Netflix, a reality show called Indian Matchmaking, where this woman basically like does matchmaking of Indian couples. I'm a child of Indian immigrants, and I just like saw my mother in this woman. I just like my parents actually rebelled against arranged marriage and had a love marriage, and there's all these themes of me like understanding my family history. So there's a lot on TV, and sometimes you just need to watch something silly and laugh, and that's okay too, right? But sometimes watching 12 episodes in one day can lead to an extent. But hold on, before we cast judgment on someone watching 12 episodes in one day, maybe someone's grieving. Maybe someone's had a really tough day. Maybe someone's dealing through burnout. And maybe just this one day, they just need to like spend a weekend watching TV. And maybe that helps them get some space and get out of their negative patterns. And maybe we don't need to be so quick to judge others or ourselves for these behaviors. So these are some examples of like reframing boundaries to rituals. And what I would love to do now is go into the idea of like moving from a morning routine to a morning ritual with a little bit of a practice. And so this is something that you could, if you're sort of the meditation traditions, you could kind of close your eyes and contemplate, and I will give you guidance. If you prefer journaling, you can grab a pen and a paper or open up a blank document and you can kind of write against some of the prompts that I'm going to share. And we're going to take 10 minutes now to explore um, a little practice that I came up with to help you kind of figure out what a ritual might be to experiment with in your own life. So I'm going to give everyone a minute now just to get organized, and then we will dive in. Okay. When you're ready, if you're meditating, find a comfortable position, something upright and alert, yet relaxed. But also remember, I might have some expertise to share today, but you are the expert on yourself and what you need. So if you want to just lie down or listen to this while you're doing the dishes or whatever you need to do, that's fine. And if you're journaling, clear some space, find a page. And let's just take a moment before we dive in to do nothing at all and notice what's here, opening to pure awareness, noticing whatever you might be hearing in this moment. Taking a deep breath if that feels good. Letting go of any effort. Slowing down the pace. Shifting from a doing mode to a being mode. For these prompts, we're not going to try so hard to think about answers. What I want you to do instead is sort of just listen to my prompt, which you'll notice me repeat a couple of times. And in the space between, listen to the answer that naturally arises in your mind. So don't try to find the answer. Let it come to you, let it arise. It's almost like you're looking at a pond and waiting for a fish or a bird to come to the surface, or you're gazing at the sky and waiting for the clouds to move and shift. Okay, here's your first prompt. What is a technology that you wrestle with in the morning? a technology that seems to be calling for inquiry, curiosity? What is a technology that you use in the morning that's ripe for investigation and maybe even letting go of guilt and shame as a part of that? Again, just noticing what answer arises from this mysterious space of mind. And if you're journaling, you can write that down or just hold it in your mind if you're contemplating. Now, when you're ready, the next prompt: what would the most extreme, strict boundary look like around this technology? What would the most extreme, strict boundary look like for this technology? How would you restrict yourself aggressively if that's what you wanted to do? Just as a thought experiment. And feel free to bring some joy into this. Like it might be deleting an app, but it also might be like, I don't know, burning your phone in a campfire or deleting your account or like writing a manifesto on social media and then deleting all your accounts or something. Like what would the most strict, extreme retreat from this technology look like? And when you're ready, the next prompt: what would your relationship with this technology look like if you just put no restrictions, boundaries at all? You just completely followed your desire in the moment. What do you imagine would happen if you were just extremely lax with this technology? And knowing that we chose a technology that's calling for inquiry, potentially one you perceive as problematic. So you might have some stories come up, and whatever comes up is okay. But if you do notice self-criticism or guilt or self-judgment, let's sort of steer away from that and more in a kind of constructive and curious realm. What would really happen? And now, when you're ready, see if you can find a sweet spot between those extremes of a realistic boundary that would set yourself up for success. So, not something that feels like a mountain to climb or a goal to achieve, but something that feels reasonable, doable, and something you could almost implement right away and feel good about. Again, what would a realistic, easy, positive boundary look like between those extremes? And now, when you're ready, take that boundary that you're contemplating or that you've written down and reflect on how you could make that fun. How could you make that a joyful, positive ritual? So, in my example, I'm only watching one show a day, but I'm popping popcorn and I'm making it a special event. You could involve other people, can invite people. You could involve anything that might make it a joyful ritual that you look forward to. So instead of feeling like aggressive, self-binding guilt or shame, it's a joyful, positive ritual that becomes a part of your morning. So from morning routine to morning ritual with this particular technology. Again, what is something that you could do to reframe this realistic boundary into a positive, joyful ritual? Something fun, maybe even funny. I'll give you one more minute with this, so feel free to resolve your contemplation. If you're contemplating, you may want to take this time to write something down, even if you weren't journaling. And for those who are journaling, feel free to um, finish anything you want to capture on the page. Okay. Whenever you're ready, take your time coming back to the group and whenever you're ready, I'd love if anyone has anything they'd like to share. Feel free to share in the chat what came up for you, or if you want to unmute and describe what that practice was like. One thing I'll say is obviously for some people, this might be private and you don't have to share anything you don't want to. But for those who don't feel like it's private, it can be really inspiring to hear other people's examples. So, Dan, do you want to get us started?
Yeah, yeah, it was really nice. I appreciated the invitation to go to both extremes and without thinking, like so naturally, something clear uh, came to mind. And it was I have this like my office is in my bedroom, and we have this portable divider that kind of blocks the desk where my computer is. And usually my phone is on the nightstand. But with this alarm clock, I think this will be a good way to you know, have a more healthy distance from my phone at night and in the morning. So the ritual that came was having the phone behind the divider and waiting until Naima, my stepdaughter, is off to school, and then going to get the phone. And before doing it, do 1 minute of laughter yoga before opening the divider and getting the phone, because my habit is to go in and I do Instagram for one of my work projects, and I love to like I do a post the day before, and I love to go in and see how's it doing, how many people liked it, and like so I think instead of just jumping right into that, some laughter yoga and a bit more distance is what I'm gonna experiment with.
Great. Thank you for sharing. And one thing that might be helpful is, if you change the cover image of your phone to something like that makes you laugh.
Okay.
There
I've got
you
Ramana
go.
Maharshi.
Yeah, there you go. Amazing. Yeah, so that could be a good reminder.
Mm.
I see a share in the chat. Oh, thanks for the kind words, John. That's great. I'm glad you find it useful. David, realize I'm a news addict. I need to manage the 24-hour news cycle fueled by the internet. Get back to portion control. Great, David. I would encourage you to find out not only how to set that boundary, but how to find the joy in that news. My example was the paper magazines. That doesn't necessarily have to be your example, but like if you have, let's say, oh, I'm only going to look at the news during work hours, maybe it's like a good opportunity to subscribe to some news source you really love and kind of find the joy of like being a part of that news community or something. It could be anything, but like finding some joy with it and not just the guilt of being stuck on the news. And maybe we have time for one more share.
Can I go?
Hmm. Yeah.
So I've taken TV shows to the extreme. Like really, really watch 10 days of binge, done 10 days of binge watching together. And it is that I have this thing that I somehow justify it, that I'm trying to untease the zeitgeist by seeing what is there. And I'm doing that at the same time, and I'm researching and I'm learning vicariously from other things. So I love watching movies and the involvement that they gather. So I've just started doing this when I'm in a good relationship with it. And I start a movie at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Mm.
And by 10 o'clock, I finished it. Then I don't have to watch a movie in the day or in the night because I love watching movies. So I'm doing my things. I'm talking to my parents. I'm doing this and that. And if that's there in the morning, then I know how to process it throughout the day, of how those ideas, those impressions are coming into my life, or how I can take inspiration from them and create something new. So I watch a movie in the morning rather than late in the night.
Absolutely. That's first of all, I love the joy that you're sharing about movies, which is like movies are great. And it's like it's so easy in this day and age to beat ourselves up about it. I think you're pointing to something that I think will be useful for everyone, which is one of the things that I've found as I've made these rituals. If we kind of sink down to the sort of spiritual or mindfulness or meditation level, and we think about attention, which I alluded to at the beginning, one thing about attention that's really powerful is that it's like you can't control your attention. It's almost like it's almost like trying to get a cat to do something. It's like you have some influence, but like not a lot. Like the cat does what it wants to do, but like, there are ways like you can put a treat out or you can like there's ways to sort of gather it. But the interesting dimension is people talk about attention being sort of scattered and being focused. And like that's a very common thing that people talk about. But people don't often talk about the quality of attention and the relationship between the quality of attention to well being and joy. So there are many ways to watch a movie. And I think what you're bringing up is the conversation of like, it's not just whether you should watch a movie or not, it's how you watch the movie. There's a difference between like putting a movie on in the background while you do all your other things and you're just kind of half watching it. And it's a stupid movie you don't really care about. And you choose it because you don't want to care if you miss a scene versus saying, hey, instead of like kind of half watching something all day, I'm going to not watch anything until my moment where I'm going to watch a full movie at 8 in the morning. That's my time. Doesn't matter what anyone else thinks about watching a movie at 8 in the morning. That's my time. And I'm going to watch it with high quality of attention. I'm going to laugh at the funny parts and I'm going to enjoy the feelings and I'm going to like let myself cry when the movie gets sad. I'm going to feel it fully. And that quality of attention is extremely relevant to our interactions with technology. So thank you for sharing that example.
Yeah, so before that, I get everything in order like you, do my work and everything. And just to add, I think I have this energy that if I have to consume things, in the morning is the best time for me to, like, if I'm studying or consuming content, even. So I still have to tinker with it. I don't know the right ritual, but I have such really rich experiences of days where it has just worked when
Hmm.
I've done this accidentally. They were not intentionally planned. It was just accidentally. So I need to still compose it in a way that it really works. But yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's going to dovetail to our next session really good. But before we do that, Analu, I hope I pronounced that right. An anthropologist in the chat here talking about how the culture we live in teaches us to process our emotions by not really processing them, but rather using technology to dissociate. I love this point. It is very much about emotion and it's about emotional need. And there is a whole element here that we can get into. But one thing I'll say right away is like, it's our culture, but it's also something about the nature of the human mind, that even people were writing about thousands of years ago in spiritual traditions about our conceptual mind and our ability to kind of rationalize a way and not face our feelings in a way. And it's easy to say something like face your feelings, but to actually face your feelings is a very brave and kind of Herculean effort. And I agree, it's almost getting harder because there's so many things you can use to sort of just trigger your conceptual mind and become a kind of dissociative, rationalizing being that's not actually kind of feeling in the heart. Now, here's the funny interaction with technology, which I have another strategy about in the book, but I'm just going to touch on it here, which is when you pay attention to a technology that you have a problematic relationship with, often a great way to short circuit the guilt is to identify what part of you is hooked on that technology and why. And often you'll find it's a healthy emotional need that is guiding you to be trapped by an illusion provided by technology. It's a healthy emotional need that's being trapped into an illusion by technology. I'll give you a couple examples. So, like if someone's stuck on social media, it's easy for them to beat themselves up about wasting their time or whatever. But like, why are they stuck on social media? Well, maybe there's a part within them that's profoundly lonely, which is very common in this society. And they're sort of like looking for connection. They're looking for relationship. That is a healthy emotional need. And if that person is able to see that, and when I'm working one-on-one with people, this often comes up. If that person is able to see that part and actually kind of befriend that part of themselves and say, thank you for trying to take care of me and address my loneliness, but I don't know if social media is giving us the connection we're actually looking for. What that opens up is an ability to find connection, deeper connection elsewhere, which not only helps satisfy that emotional need, but also kind of heals your relationship with the social media because now you can use social media without getting totally stuck on it because it doesn't become your only source of human connection and love and relationship. So there's something really, really powerful about identifying the deeper emotional needs behind our technology use. Okay, I'm looking at our time. We've got 30 minutes. I want to go into our after work exploration. And I had a third one planned if we had time. But what I'll do at the end is I'm just going to talk a little bit about bedtime as opposed to do the activity and the exercise. So let's move into after work. Now, for a lot of people, that's 5 o'clock, but it looks different for other people. So I think reflecting on your own life, we're just talking about that moment of the day where you're putting your responsibilities down. So for some people, that's like putting your kid to bed. For some people, it's like clocking out of work at 5 p.m. Some people, it's like ending work, your overnight shift in the morning, right? So it could be different for different people. But the point is, we're kind of moving into a more leisurely time of our day or a more personal time at least. And the strategy I want to invoke here is the first strategy from the book, which is start with awareness. And I thought it would be great to address this here because this is really getting into the crux of this interface between mindfulness and technology that I've been exploring that a lot of people find counterintuitive. So we have to ask some important questions here. What is awareness? What is attention? What is mindfulness? How is mindfulness relevant to technology? And how does this actually help with our relationship with technology and move us to a more secure relationship? So, what we're kind of finding, first of all, what I said earlier is true, which is attention. Scientists think of it in different ways, but you can almost think of it as like a vector of where you're devoting your mental resources at any given time. So, right now, most of you are probably devoting your mental resources to me and my voice. That again, you're a human being and I'm not that exciting. So your attention is also jumping around, right? Jumping to other things. Some of you might actually be doing something else while listening to this. And so your attention is playing a little bit of a dance, like you're noticing where you're walking or driving, and you're also noticing me come in, and maybe you're noticing thoughts. One thing to understand about attention is that it's linear. It's sort of serial. You can't pay attention to multiple things at the same time. Multitasking is a myth. What we're really doing when we're multitasking is we're moving our attention back and forth between multiple things rapidly, right? Which, by the way, the science shows is pretty inefficient. So multitasking is not always a great idea. Sometimes it's necessary, but it's certainly not a way of working with intention. The other thing to know about attention is that there are certain things that tend to draw attention. right? I'm sure you can probably think of a few, right? If someone says your name, that draws your attention, right? If something has a bright color, like a bright red, or it's moving, movement draws your attention. Novelty draws your attention. Something new arises. A new animal shows up in the yard, or a new person comes in the room, right? Have you ever had that experience? Like you're at a party, maybe there's 6 or 7 people around, someone new shows up at the door, like the whole room changes. Everyone is like, "Oh, hey, how you doing?" Like it's very difficult to sustain the thread of what was already going on because all 7 people in that room, their attention has been shifted. Now, the attention economy, and I'm a designer by trade, design is largely a choreography of attention. And so one can use that to great effect. For example, a red, bright octagon or hexagon or octagon that says stop on it is designed to call your attention in the interest of safety, right? You shouldn't miss the stop sign. If they made the stop sign green and it's right in front of a tree and the word stop was written in a tiny font, that's not going to be that useful. But you know what else is red and moving is the little notification number beside all your app icons and your notifications, also designed to draw your attention. So that's like an example, right? Another thing that's going to draw your attention is that little countdown timer after you're done watching an episode of TV that's like next episode starts in 10, 9, 8, 7, right? So you're starting to see the attention economy at work, right? You're starting to see all these little design patterns that are designed to keep you engaged. Now, here's what's interesting. The research shows that mindfulness practice actually changes your relationship to your attention and opens up your ability to be more present with a wider field of awareness, which is actually quite mysterious. There's a kind of like, we could pontificate spiritually about whether to call it consciousness or awareness or, the ground of being or cosmic consciousness, as some teachers say. So I'm not going to get into all that right now, but there is apparently some sort of larger mysterious field of awareness that attention kind of picks things from and moves within. Now, what mindfulness teachers and meditation teachers in certain traditions that work with attention tend to kind of focus on is this idea of grounding in awareness. One of my teachers calls awareness the essence of meditation. So you're grounding in this larger awareness. And what that allows you to do, for example, if you're paying attention to your breath, it's not really about the breath. It's about what happens when you try to point your attention at something. And then you notice, as I'm sure anyone who's tried to meditate can attest to, it just starts going all over the place. It's just like, okay, breath, breath, breath. What am I going to have for dinner tonight? Breath, breath, breath. Oh, I don't know if I came across very well the way I presented that at my meeting today. Breath, 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 breath. And it's just this weird dialogue. But over time, we start to learn a lot of insights about how to do that gently and how to learn about what draws our mind and how our attention moves over time. The neuroscience of this actually shows there's a series of structures in the brain called the default mode network. It's a series of structures in your brain, and you can look this up to get a lot more detail. But at a surface level, what I'll say is the default mode network is associated with mind wandering, self referential thinking, daydreaming. It's that part of your brain that activates when you're in your default mode. So picture you waiting for the bus, right? Bus is here in 10 minutes. You got nothing to do. This is where you might see the default mode network start to fire up. And then picture you deciding to work on something. You might see the default mode network power down. Now, here's what the researchers that have been working on mindfulness and meditation have found is that not only when I guide you, for example, to do a meditation, which I'm going to do shortly, not only does the default mode network power down in that moment, but people who have meditated in their life for 50 hours, 500 hours, 5,000 hours, 15,000 hours, like I'm talking about monks now, what you not only see is when they snap into meditation, the default mode just completely shut off, but they're also able in daily life to actually shift their default mode network almost like a volume knob. So that like if they're working on something, they're able to kind of turn it up and let the thoughts flow and the creativity flow But then when they're waiting for the bus, they can just turn it down and just wait for the bus and enjoy the breeze and not necessarily pull out their phone, right? So there's this strange interaction between awareness that you practice in the moment and these insights you get with actually the way you show up in life and the way you show up with technology. So foundationally, when Dan gave an example of like moving his phone away from his bedside table, that's a great strategy to try, but it's not necessarily for everyone. Because if you're able to stay grounded in awareness, you might realize that having your phone on your bedside table is not actually a big distraction for you. And maybe it's actually a great way to wake up for you. Maybe you wake up, you roll over, you answer a few messages, you feel connected with the people in your life, and it's a great way to start the day. Or maybe you roll over and you doom scroll the latest news and you start your day with just a baseline level of anxiety that's through the roof, and then maybe that is not a great place for your phone when you're sleeping. The difference here is self awareness, practicing awareness of your relationship with technology, and using that to make skillful choices. Two implications before we get into the exercise. Number one, this is why everyone's advice online about what to do with your relationship with technology may or may not apply to you. Unless you are becoming more aware of your relationship with technology, you actually aren't going to be able to pick which ingredients to cook with because you need to know where the challenges are. I'll give you an example from my life. I love video games. I like to play video games. I play video games with my son. He's got limits. There are some video games that are like a beautiful work of art. I'm playing this game right now called Ori and the Will of the Wisps. If you look it up, you will hear beautiful music and art. It's just a work of art. But then there's other video games. There was a game that I played when my son was just born called Rocket League that became a kind of compulsive fixation for me. And instead of beating myself up over it, I noticed that with self awareness. I noticed it was hooking me. I noticed it was distracting me. I also noticed I was in a really tough part of life where I didn't have a lot of freedom and I didn't have a lot of time to play. And I was really seeking something to sort of let off some steam. So I let myself play it a little bit, but then it got so difficult to play just a little bit that I cut it out of my life because of self awareness. But other people can probably play Rocket League without a problem. So it's not a judgment on Rocket League necessarily in this case. It's a judgment on my relationship with it. That being said, it might have been designed to hook me, and that's a whole systemic conversation that's separate from our own relationship. So that's the first implication. The second implication about this is that by practicing awareness, the neuroscience clearly shows that awareness is a skill that can be trained and learned. So by doing this more and more, looking into your relationship with technology, looking to your relationship with awareness and your mind in general, whether that's through meditation or journaling, you will increase your capacity to have a healthier relationship with things like technology in your life. And so that's what we're going to do now. We're going to spend about 10 minutes or so practicing with awareness. And you'll notice in my guidance that there is a sort of sweet spot between aggressively grinding and trying to pay attention versus being totally lax and letting things go, that we're trying to kind of find this dance with a gentle sense of awareness. And so that's what we're going to do. And again, I have some expertise to share, but you are the expert on yourself and your own mind. So lie down if you'd like to. Just listen if you don't want to follow the instructions. If you've got something else you want to do that works with awareness, please use this time to do that. And other than that, if you are willing and open to try a meditation with me, find yourself a comfortable position, whatever feels natural for you. Typically, we like to talk about a position that is upright. So it can help to sort of stretch your body up, almost like the top of your head is reaching for the sky, rolling the shoulders back, and then relaxing into that straight spine. So keeping the spine straight and upright, but letting your muscles sort of hang off the bone and finding a gentle posture that captures the state of mind that we're shooting for here, which is alert yet relaxed. Alert yet relaxed. And so now that you've found a posture that you think is right, I'm going to invite you to feel into your body and notice any micro adjustments you might want to make, whether that's changing the position of your feet, adjusting where your legs are or the angle of your hips, rotating your core around to kind of find a delicate balance point. Maybe you're a little too tense, so kind of letting go of your shoulders a bit. Maybe you're a little too lax, so kind of opening your chest up a little bit. Maybe stillness is not the way you find awareness, so finding something to fidget with is okay. Letting go of your jaw. If you'd like to close your eyes, you're welcome to. If you want to just find a gentle place to rest your gaze or look out a window, that's okay too. And now noticing that I haven't given you any instruction on what to pay attention to, which may be new. That's okay. What I'll invite you to do instead is to just notice what you are naturally paying attention to in each moment. Your attention might wander. Maybe you're noticing your breath. Maybe you weren't noticing your breath, but now you are because I said it. Maybe there's an inner voice in your mind that's thinking about things. That's okay. The goal is not to stop thinking, but maybe notice what that feels like. What are you thinking about? What is the tone of that inner voice? Is it quick? Is it slow? Maybe there's images in your imagination that are arising. Maybe nothing. Maybe you're just uncomfortable. Maybe your attention is being drawn to pain or discomfort. For these few moments, everything is okay exactly the way it is. Just letting go of any effort to change what you're experiencing. All we're doing is just being as we are and noticing that. Noticing what this moment is like. Maybe your attention is gently settling somewhere, but more likely it's moving all over the place, and that's okay too. And if you find yourself overly serious in this practice, sometimes trying too hard can actually run counter to the goal of settling in awareness. So letting go of too much effort, but not all the effort. Still want a little bit. And maybe bringing in a healthy dose of curiosity. What does it sound like where you are? Is there any beauty in that sound? What does it feel like in your body? And even if you have a challenging relationship with your body, is there any gratitude there for this miracle of being alive? If your eyes are closed, what does it look like when your eyes are closed? Maybe you see darkness or color. movement. If your eyes are open, color, shape, movement, rich tapestry of light. And if you're struggling with this, that's okay too. What does struggling with this feel like? Welcome everything. It's all within the larger container of awareness, which is who you really are. Like a sky, a vast blue sky. And all these experiences are just clouds and storms and lightning and but the sky is still there, behind it all, around it all. Or maybe like an ocean, and all these experiences are just waves flowing through the ocean. But you're grounded in the massive depth. And for these last few minutes, even if there's just a tiny bit of effort you were using, just letting go of all the effort now, almost like launching a boat off the pier, just letting it float out there, letting go of any attempt to control or fix or any attempt to do this right or any attempt to meditate, any idea that that's what we're doing now, just letting all of that go and just being in this moment for a minute or two of silence. And whenever you're ready, gradually transitioning back to the group. Maybe take a deep breath in and let out a big sigh if that feels good. Give yourself a stretch, have a sip of water, whatever you need. Take your time. Let's leave a little bit of room for maybe two or three shares if anyone has anything they'd like to share about what that experience was like for them, how it relates to the larger context. Feel free to share in the chat or unmute. And like I always say, the answer to the question, why share, is that it's sometimes incredibly inspiring for other people just to hear what you're really dealing with. So it doesn't have to be positive or negative. It could be like, Jay, that practice was awful, and please never make me do that again. And that's fine too. Whatever you want to share is great.
First of all, that was beautiful. The prompts were quite quite beautifully tended to. And whenever I came back to them, they grounded me. Uh, Also, I have this thing about when I go silent, I close my eyes stay up. But then I have this thing about curiosity about it. why does that happen? Then there is also some answers that I hold, which don't really resolve it, but they give me some sense of positive thing that, or so I don't. I have this. I'm just going to end with this, that if you have tears, let them show, is a line from Marco Pierre White from MasterChef. If you're feeling the emotion, you just show it. Don't wipe your tears. It's a communication, it's a mechanism. Don't wipe it away. So that there are a lot of narratives in my mind, and I was playing with them while I was aware of them. So
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing. I think, one of the things, the frames that I find useful around awareness, you mentioned this idea of grounding, right? It's almost like there's so many layers on top of our raw experience of thoughts and ideas and stories and like ultimately there is a grounding of just sort of raw sense experience that we can sort of start to dissociate with and get divorced from, especially in our modern technological world where, we're just being kind of inundated with conceptual information at all times. So beautiful share. Thank you for that. I'm seeing some great shares in the chat. I won't read them out, but please look if you haven't looked at the chat. Anyone else want to unmute and share anything before we move on?
Hi Jay,
Hi, Juanita.
how are you?
Good.
Thank you for this session. It's really cool to see that there are people out there integrating both worlds. I can relate to your story a lot because I'm also a UX designer, and I've been practicing meditation for around 4 years, and I felt like I couldn't like I was kind of contradictory UX designer because I'm not into technology, but I'm in technology working there, and that made me a good designer in the sense that I'm designing for people that need things very simple, very minimalistic. And lately I'm drawn into like silence. How do we make these devices and these apps and these things that we're relating to more silent? Like we designed them for them to be, like you say, caught attention all the time. And now how do we turn it around and make it something that becomes kind of like the practice that you just did, something that allows us to approach it with curiosity, with intention, with more tenderness. The first exercise for me was with WhatsApp. So it's like I want to wake up and check these messages, and then this anxiety of, oh, it's someone writing me, but then I turn it around like you did, and I was like, oh, it allows me to connect to the people that I love. So maybe take an intentional time to talk to these people and respond mindfully instead of like this kind of hazard that you're in all the time. So that was really interesting. Thank you. I was gonna say something else and now I forgot. Oh yeah, that I'm doing these exercises based on this book called The Art of Noticing. I don't know if you know it, but by Rob
I do, yeah.
Walker. And I'm starting to do them in the city. I live in Barcelona, so it's like training your attention in the city towards like pointing it out, no? And I felt like I did this one to go to a flea market and follow a color. It was color hunting. So I would have to follow the color pink. And I felt like my attention was like this weak muscle. Like I was following the pink, but I got distracted so easily. And then I felt like as the exercise progressed, my attention was stronger a bit. Like I could feel the sore muscle, I could feel it like getting stronger. So it's a practice. And I think there's so many creative ways that we can turn this around and bring this together. There's so many things I want to say also, but yeah, I think that's my share for now. So I don't take all this time. But thank you.
Thank
I
you.
find this really interesting.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, and you can take the time. It's fine. I
Yeah.
think I think it's very relatable, certainly as someone who works in design, to have
Yeah.
that, so we definitely have that in common. And I think, one of the things people often think about meditation as this thing that you do in silence, like in your room, but like,
Mm,
when we talk about tapping into the larger noticing of awareness and like noticing those details,
yeah.
connecting with technology in that way as a part of this. I think there's something that I know we're at time, but maybe I think what I'll leave y'all with, we won't have time to get to the bedtime routine stuff, but you can find lots of stuff online. So please follow up with me. But the thing that I'll say is like, with AI coming and everything that's happening in the technological world, and what Juanita just shared about like being someone who works in technology and feeling this divide between, their passion for technology, for meditation, and then the work in technology, and that weird divide, and be someone who's dealt with that for 2 decades at this point. One thing I'm coming to start to realize, especially as I see this AI coming and like a lot of the developments in that space, is I think there has never been a time where it's been more important that our wisest people go online. Because what happens if the wisest people don't go online? I think we did that experiment in the past 30 years, right? We know what happens if our wisest people are not guiding the development of technology, are not being a part, not having a voice in the room in the way technology is implemented, or might even say inflicted upon billions of people in the world without any sense of these deeper heart-centered connections or the value of mental health and like an even pace of life and quality of life and the art of noticing and all these types of things. And so I don't know exactly how I'm doing my part in that, but I often you'll hear me talk about in public forums about attention activism, like a kind of sort of subversive stance in society around this. And I think part of that is for this next phase of AI, how do we ensure that some of the development of these extensions of our mind that we're putting out in the world are guided not just by our base instincts for reputation and profit and pleasure, but are also guided for our innate goodness, our innate capacities for compassion and kindness, and ultimately love, right? So if we all just say, hey, we're not going to use tech because we're mindfulness people or whatever, or we're like, you know, too calm for that, all the people, which is the majority of people who are living online, are just subjected to the least wise version of the human mind possible. And that does not feel like a very good direction for the future. So I appreciate all of your attention. I hope this is somehow useful. You can find lots of my writing online, and please stay in touch if you need anything from me.